So now let's talk about why I prefer not to use the phrase ready now successors. Well, the first reason is because when you say, who's ready now for your job? You're freaking people out a little bit. They're saying, nobody's ready for my job. And so you've increased emotion. And the last thing you want to do is increase emotion in succession planning. The second reason that I don't prefer the phrase ready now successor is because it's very vague. And remember, just because someone's a qualified successor doesn't mean we don't also identify development actions for them. While someone could be qualified for the position if it becomes open in the future, there are still things we can do now to always continue to increase our readiness for the role. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but Doris, we always use ready now. We've been using it for years and I don't want to change. Or we have ready now as our definition in our succession planning online system. So we're not going to change that. And that's okay. The important thing is to remember to ask the questions about their qualifications for the job. And you can use the phrasing of, if the position were open today, would this person be considered qualified to at least interview and be considered for the position? I find that this really helps managers to make more accurate decisions about successor candidates. I'm also not fond of the phrase ready 1 to 2 year successors, because what we find is every year they're going to be ready in 1 to 2 years. Next year they'll be ready in 1 to 2 years. The year after that they'll be ready in 1 to 2 years. So watch my funny little video to discuss the problems with identifying people as ready 1 to 2 year successors. And then we'll talk about how to change this to help prevent this problem. Doesn't really define, well, how do we know if they're qualified or actually ready now for the position? And so we also forget that that person who's in the position now, they probably weren't ready for that job either when they started. The fact is, we're looking for people who are qualified for the position, and they will still need to develop competencies and skills on the job, as everyone does. The third reason I don't really like ready now as a phrase is because we say they're ready now for that position and we don't assign any development actions to help increase their readiness. So earlier I talked about asking the question, if someone is a qualified successor, if the position were open today, would you at least consider them to be qualified to interview for the position and to be seriously considered for the role? If the manager says no, then you can ask, well, why not? What are the qualification or skill gaps? So this is the process I use to help identify future successors, and I call them future successors with gaps. Each gap might be a qualification, such as a degree or a certification that needs to be completed, or it could be a knowledge or skill gap. Now, you can still use the phrase ready 1 to 2 year successor after you've identified the qualification and competency gaps that are preventing this person from being a ready now or qualified successor. Only then actually can you determine if they will be ready in 1 to 2 years. For example, if they need to complete a 4-year degree, they're not going to be ready in 1 to 2 years. Additionally, after we identify the gaps, then we're going to identify the development actions to close the gaps. This way, a future 2-gap successor could become a future 1-gap successor in a short time period by developing that specific gap and closing that gap. It's also super important to revisit the development actions to see if these gaps are closed at least every 6 months, rather than waiting a whole year for the next talent review meeting. I hope you find this new way of looking at qualified and future gap successors as very helpful to help identify successors who are valid and to help develop them.